Hi, welcome to BariNation, where we support the bariatric community with humor, humility, and honesty.
You've just tuned into a podcast that welcomes you into a community, a resource center, and a safe place that powers your journey towards personal wellness.
Our goal is you leave us today feeling hopeful, inspired, and ready to live your best bariatric life.
Hi, friends. Welcome to the podcast. Today, I have the honor of welcoming back one of our favorite humans on the planet, expert in BariNation, dietitian extraordinaire, Miss Kayla Girgen.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Well, you knew this conversation was coming because a few weeks ago in the BariNation membership community, somebody asked a very poignant question about calories after bariatric surgery. And I know that you kind of addressed this in one of the many meetups that you lead in our community, but we just felt this conversation was important for every bariatric patient to hear. The question was, can I just eat 1,200 calories for the rest of my life and be successful? We want to know the answer to that. Can we or can we not?
Yeah, I might split this up before and after surgery because I feel like I would imagine that 95% of people, maybe 100%, 99% have probably tried that, prior to surgery in some form or another.
Yes.
It could be calorie counting, even maybe pseudo calorie counting, like something like Weight Watchers, for example, that's kind of has that same element to it where you're just counting points, counting calories. But I will say kind of thinking about post-op. So anybody who's maybe in those that pre-op stage or early post-op, that's part of the point of surgery is calorie restriction. You've got your volume reduced pretty significantly. But I think when we look in the long-term scope of things, 1,200 calories is just not sustainable for, I would say, the majority of individuals post-surgery. And I think a big point comes down to quality over quantity or calories. So thinking about what are those proportions of macros looking like?
Yes. And when you're talking about that, Kayla, and when you say macros, just to make sure that we're all speaking the same language, right? A calorie is made up with these different elements, these different macro and micronutrients. And when they come together, it gives us this caloric value, this energy value for the thing that we're eating. But that thing that we're eating is carbs and it's fat, or it's a combination of carbs and fats and proteins, right? So all these things come together to make this thing that we're eating that has an energy value, and that energy value is calories. And as bariatric patients, we often hear, right, it's about calories in, calories out, or it's what you consume versus what your body does with them. But the thing about the disease of obesity is it messes with our body's ability to use those calories in a quote unquote normal way, right?
Right. And if it were that simple, I feel like your body's just not a closed loop system. We have all of these different inputs and variables that are, impacting calorie burn or metabolism in a lot of ways. And I think even looking at extremely low calorie diets, over time, a lot of times, your body is really smart too. It'll start to catch on and it'll start to slow things down. Mm-hmm. So yeah, if I see advice, eat 800 calories a day every day for the rest of your life after surgery, I can't think of any advice that makes me want to scream, in madness louder than that.
I would agree. I mean, just knowing as somebody who has been on every diet and done everything, right? That works for a certain time. But I just remember on those extremely low calorie diets, my brain and my body worked overtime to get me to consume a higher amount. It was a nonstop bombardment of thoughts and desires up here. And one of the tools that I've recently onboarded, which we were just talking about, is I had my resting metabolic rate tested because I wanted to know how many calories does my body need to just exist in the day, to literally get up and do nothing. What is actually happening internally? Because it's great to kind of have these blanket, guidelines, but the blanket guidelines don't really speak to me. And the other thing that I worry about too is knowing that this disease is operating in the background. What is the disease doing in my body? So I had my resting metabolic rate tested and I came back at 1,350 calories a day. That was it. That is an extremely low number based on my lean mass that I have. That math doesn't math. And where I had the test done, and even with my new PCP, everybody was like, well, now you actually have the evidence. Now you can really see how the disease is impacting your body. So it's a powerful piece of information, but there is a kind of a catch to that too, right? It's What is my body doing with those calories though? Now that I know how many I need, what is it actually doing with it? And that's almost a different question.
Yeah. And I think that's great information to have, because I think so often we think that the calories that when we think in that mindset of like calories in, calories out, we always go for exercise. So we're looking at, what the elliptical says or what the treadmill says, like how many calories did I burn? I can eat that. And the test that you had done basically shows that your basal metabolic rate or like resting energy expenditure, sometimes that's used interchangeably. Basically, if you were to lay in bed all day, you're burning 1,350 calories without lifting a finger. So that is, 20% of that goes to just your brain, breathing. I would say digestion takes a lot of work. Even, musculature, like you said, you might be on that lower end for like compared to your lean body mass. But what I see too is that regardless of whether you're working out or not, like your muscles, your bone are always kind of regenerating and tearing down and building back up. And it is really up to you or, any of the listeners here, how that tissue is building back up too. Are you adding in resistance training where you're maybe building more like muscle mass, for example, because regardless, even if you're not working out, all of that's going on, that maintenance is going on in the background.
Yes. Yep. What are some of the kind of dangers, or what are some of the things that could negatively be impacted if we are eating in such a low caloric deficit, or if we're taking in such a low amount of calories?
Yeah, I think there's both like physical repercussions, but then you have the mental. We talked a little bit maybe about that. Maybe I'll start there because I think just that mindset, like when you have a certain tally of numbers, I feel like, for anyone who's counted points or calories, like if you feel frantic, you're like, oh my gosh, it's breakfast and I've already used up 600 calories. Oh my gosh, like look at my coffee creamer.
Yes.
I feel
Gets me every time.
Yeah. So I feel like just starting your day on edge like that, like mentally, you're just kind of bracing all day. You're thinking about the next thing. So I think the natural thing is just to kind of like stretch out those calories a lot. So I see a lot of like grazing because of, it's like, okay, I'm going to have 200 calories here, 200 there. So you're not like really ever feeling like full or, maybe like fulfilled after a meal. So I think that mental piece is one. On the physical end of things, I feel like when you're eating in such a calorie restriction for so long, your metabolism again starts to slow down. And that can, if that calorie deficit is too big, you might see a stall on the scale. Your metabolism starts to slow just because that input and output tend to kind of mirror each other a little bit too. So even if you're eating, say, the same amount of calories, some people will maybe take those calories, put them into meals versus that grazing all day. And sometimes that can help the mental and I would say the physical component. And again, focusing on that like quality over quantity, kind of tediously counting. Are you doing, mostly whole foods, or are you opting for something that's in a package and marketed as low calorie that might not, keep you as full and satisfied?
Oh,
yes.
Oh, okay. That just made something click in my brain right there, right? It's that marketing element of low calorie. And then it's our like, I'm blanking on the word, but it's like when you have grown up in diet mentality that is really hard to break through. And that marketing piece is a whole nother angle that we have to fight against when we are trying to understand not only what is the disease of obesity doing in my own body, but how can I best fight back against it? And that's something that can really throw off our game.
And I think the bariatric community is like prime target for a lot of those things, like just because something's high protein, a lot of those things tend to be highly processed or, maybe something I'd consider like a slider food. It's not really like leaving you full and satisfied. I think we had a conversation about that. We could probably link. But...
We did. and I will. You guys go to the show notes. Go to the show notes. It'll be linked there.
Yes. So we were talking about, I think, potatoes versus potato chips or something.
Yes.
So
yes,
I feel like the bariatric community is like, prime for some of that marketing. Just because something's high protein doesn't mean that it's maybe fulfilling.
Yes.
Or again, same thing with like low calories when we're looking in that scope doesn't mean it's, maybe the healthiest option either.
Yes. Yep. Okay. We're going to keep this conversation going in the bonus episode because I really want to circle back to that. This is an important thing. But if somebody is listening or watching and they are ready to really kind of understand like, okay, how many calories do I need for myself? How can I really combat the disease with my nutrition? Where do you recommend they start?
I would say a couple different options. Like, it doesn't even have to be calories. Like, a lot of times I'll have people maybe focus on like protein. I feel like I hear that from so many people, especially those who've had bariatric surgery. It's like, oh, when I'm eating my protein, I'm not hungry. So if that's you, that might be a good spot to start. And if you feel like you get wrapped up in the numbers, you know, maybe I would head that protein route before getting too kind of fixated on the calorie proportion. Otherwise, if you're looking for a little bit more guidance, like a lot of apps will calculate that for you if you input your goals. I will just say that sometimes I, even am more on the generous side. So maybe you start at what would be considered like your maintenance calories and then just see how that feels. And then maybe you slowly start to scale back until you see maybe the scale move or you're able to find that balance a little bit, because I feel like I tend to see too big of a calorie deficit, where if we can shorten that up a little bit, a lot of times people feel more satisfied and the scale moves, which I feel like is a double bonus.
Oh, that is the ultimate goal, right? Is that we want to really satiate that hunger. We don't want to be driven by our hunger signals, and we do want to see some reflection of the work in the scale. So yeah, absolutely. And I'll also say too, I'm working with an individual right now. I had my RMR tested. I have a new care team. I'm working with a registered dietitian. That has been one of the best things that I've been able to do, is really work with these individuals, get this data so that I know that it's right for me and that it's reflecting what's actually happening in my body. And then I also have the space to practice this in the BariNation community, right? So it's really like this holistic approach that I'm taking. And I've never felt more empowered when it comes to my own health, now that I not only have the information, but I have the expertise and I have the community to help. So if you think that this would be beneficial for you, Kayla works one-on-one with bariatric patients just like you. She's there for that. She has her own amazing community for women who want to focus on nutrition, strength training. And then, of course, there's BariNation. She leads in BariNation as well. So there are plenty of places to start if you would like to onboard that kind of expert angle. But I really like what you talked about, Kayla. It's all about kind of being the scientist in your own experiment, focusing on protein and just taking a step back and going, okay, I don't understand some things, but what I do know is I do know protein. That's where I'm going to start. That's a really safe place to go.
Don't do all the things at once. That never gets us to where we want to go. Yeah.
Never. All it does is like clog the input and then you just go nowhere. Just go nowhere.
Yes.
Kayla, I know this went by so quickly, but if people want to connect and follow you, where can they do so?
Yes, you can find me at Kayla Girgen RD on all the things. You can also find me at KaylaGirgenRD.com. And I look forward to seeing you there. My DMs are always open. I'm happy to help.
Awesome. And we'll make sure this is all linked in the show notes. Kayla, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
That wraps up another empowering episode of the BariNation podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, keep the conversation going by joining the BariNation membership community, where you can attend live support events, access on-demand resources, and find a caring community.
Join us at barination.mn.co. If you found this podcast valuable, help us produce it by becoming a $5 monthly supporter at barinationpodcast.com.
And just remember, at the end of the day, you've got this, we've got you, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.